All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Today we're going to be going over AWS Startups. So let me present and then we'll get started. All right, so welcome to AWS Startups. So we're going to start off by going over developing an idea. So a founder's first goal is to create a product that solves a conflict for customers. And when you're starting a startup as a founder, you should ask these questions like who is the product for? Why is the product needed? What problem does it actually solve? And is this problem important enough? And is there a need for this product? And we have a quote from Steve Blank, who's a famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur, which says more startups fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product development. All right, so finding a co-founder. So obviously, a co-founder is not required, but it's important to note that the most successful startups have a founder and a co-founder. Despite this, most failures in startups are in fact caused by conflicts between the two founders. So you should be truthful about your strengths and your weaknesses in order to effectively find a co-founder that complements your skills. And a few tips for hiring is do not give everyone a high title. Do not follow major companies' recruiting techniques because obviously you want to do what works for your company the best. Hire those who obviously have faith in your company and have trial periods for potential employees. Now we're going to go over understanding equity and compensation models. So don't leave anything out of the discussion when it comes to equity distributions among your co-founders. Unequal split of equity slash profit can lead to distrust, and giving an even share to each co-founder helps the company come first. Have equity discussions early so that lawyers and shareholders won't need to be involved. All right, debunking myths. So renting an office is unnecessary when starting off. Work in a garage, library, coffee shop, or spare bedroom. If a formal work setting is required, one can visit AWS lofts to be in the proximity of technical experts. Keep an eye on monthly expenses such as rent and payroll. Measure the rate at which profit grows. Measure the cost of acquiring new customers, and follow set timetables in order to keep on pace with goals. So the myth on this slide is that renting an office is obviously needed. You don't need that. You can start anywhere. All right, customer discovery. So you want to make sure that you validate your idea by discussing your product with people you know. This can be friends, family, potential customers, etc. And customer discovery is ultimately evaluating, correcting, and refining your idea. It requires a repetitive cycle also, which is building, learning, testing, and evaluating. The more customer feedback you get, the greater advantage you receive. And obviously, you want to give customers what they crave. You want to solve a problem that's going to help a lot of people so that once you make your product, you can make the most profit off of it. All right, so like all the other live streams that have happened, all the videos that are on these slides are going to be posted in the description of the live stream once it's ended. So if you want some extra information on certain topics that we'll be covering throughout the slideshow, you can go over there and watch these videos. All right. So the next part of our slideshow is how to find and listen to customers. So interviews with customers are ultimately the best way to receive feedback, and it's going to help you figure out what matters to them or what they need solved. Every idea starts with finding a new way to please customers. The goal is to constantly update and to keep up with the customer's needs and to determine whether your services will be used by consumers or other businesses. We have 5 tips for communicating with actual customers that are going to be involved. Number one is stay away from vague inquiries. Avoid yes or no questions. Inquire fundamental questions designed to evince insight. Um, Try to use more general, open-ended questions and end conversations by asking your customer who else to talk to, so you can find more and more people. All right, customer validation and understanding your market. So customer validation is finding and comprehending your customer's market, and enthusiasm does not necessarily mean that you have a large market. How large is your market? Is it large enough to support your business? How many people are going to buy your product? Is it a new or already existing market? See the click-through rate, like how popular it is, and create a sign-up page for your product's launch. Consider how much money it will take to reach your markets. Software-only products cost much less as compared to hardware-only costs. Consider implementation roadblocks, such as following certain rules for the specific industry involved. And it's important to know your competition and learn from their mistakes to help set you apart. Building a prototype. So, a prototype is obviously something that is created in order to see whether or not a final product are going to succeed after launch. You want to focus on learning about your product rather than coding and adding to it. And a prototype has to be added in order to make the product best suited for customers' needs. Do not hurry the process of making a product's prototype and check frequently to make sure the prototype actually follows your goal of customer satisfaction. All right, now we're going to introduce the topic or the concept of an MVP. So, it's a minimal viable product. That's what MVP stands for. And it's typically the first product that a company makes. It's thought of as the simplest edition of a product that still proves a hypothesis. And it requires as little features as possible. An MVP is the first product to be ready for the consumer market, and it tests a hypothesis and it's a bare bones structure of what the idea was actually meant to be. Just like a prototype, an MVP won't be ideal, and it prioritizes functionality over aesthetics. All right, now how to develop an MVP. So building an MVP has multiple repetitive cycles, and it goes through processes such as designing, building, deploying, and measuring. With each addition of new processes, the MVP becomes steadily better, and it allows for quick and responsive feedback from users. You want to make sure that you're trying to keep your MVP simple. And we have a quote from another entrepreneur named Reid Hoffman. If you aren't embarrassed by the first version of your product, you ship too late. Add features after your hypothesis has been verified. And again, all the videos are going to be found in the description once the live is ended. Before we move on, let me just do something really quickly and then we'll go to the next part of our presentation. Alrighty. Alright, the next part is sprints. So sprints are processes or processes that are used often when developing software. And it's a certain amount of time where predetermined work is completed. It has a fixed theme and objective and a deliverable function. Sorry about that. It should last 1 to 2 weeks, and the shorter the better, as your goals aren't really going to change while doing it. Save customer feedback for the next sprint, and you want to prioritize primary business functions. Focus on high effect and quick to build work. And we have another quote here. You have the capacity to build one great product. Make sure it's the right one. The recommendations after sprints are continuous implementations and constant delivery. All right, now for some potential pitfalls. So, an anti pattern is a universal response to a conflict which is unproductive. And being prepared for an anti pattern will help. And it's going to help to prevent whenever they obviously show up because they're going to show up at one point. Technical debt gathers when engineers rush the work instead of focusing on quality and proper implementation. And technical debt doesn't necessarily come from laziness, but a strategic decision to swiftly eradicate a conflict. It's not generalizing code can lead to extra coding work and refactoring, undifferentiated heavy lifting, and customers want the product and do not mind you borrowing from existing resources. All right, now we have a lot of fundamentals for working with AWS. We've covered one-way doors and two-way door decisions, and they don't happen equally. Two-door decisions are the most common and occur the majority of the time, and one-door decisions should obviously be thought through thoroughly. Security decisions are the one-door decisions that cannot be remade. When making security decisions, one should consider both their and AWS's responsibilities, who gets access to certain objects amongst the workforce, and how much access the users actually receive. So startups on AWS receive enterprise level security, and AWS offers SSL and DDoS protection. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and the standard security technology for creating a, a protected link between a web server and a browser. DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service, and it's a cyber attack that interferes with the services of the host. Startups must know the relation of the product with their government, healthcare, and more, and they have to follow any rules and regulations of the actual field. Points of integrations also have to be considered, as developers will not be able to understand a product without proper documentation. An API is an application programming interface, and it's a set of guidelines to connect with another person's software, and it's important to select the correct database for the type of data that you need to store. Alright, introduction to data architecture with AWS. So a monolithic architecture is an architecture that combines all the working parts of an application such as data input, output, processing, error handling, and more, all together into one singular program. It allows for rapid development as you don't need to make the process ahead of time, and a well-designed monolith can be scaled horizontally and then broken apart at a later date. Architecture applications such as Amazon Elastic Beanstalk will automate all processes for you and is much simpler to work and handle. Microservices are important independent services that each perform its own functions and they work together as a single product. However, if one goes down, the others are unaffected. Microservices are good for scaling large systems, but they take longer to build. They optimize data architecture for speed, and serverless is a type of architecture where servers is that code is running on do not need to be set up by the users. It grants more time to focus on the code, and it automatically scales for the user to avoid the user from having to predict customer traffic. All right, assessing your legal needs. So, a common legal decision that a business makes is whether or not it becomes a legal entity. A legal entity is when a company gains legal rights and obligations such as tax filings. There are multiple types of legal entities, like limited liabilities. What is a limited liability? So this is the detachment of personal resources from business resources. It prevents business owners' responsibility and losses and legal ability. It exists to help business owners take risks without the fear of legal action or liability. It's not perfect and is not a get out of jail free card though. Now, what are unincorporated entities? So these are businesses that do not have limited liability and are known as unincorporated entities. The two types of this are sole proprietorship and general partnerships. Sole proprietorship is owned by businesses and managed by one person. On the other hand, a general partnership has numerous owners and splits up the responsibilities amongst these owners. There is no legal difference between the owner and the business itself, and sole proprietorship is cheaper to start, but it comes with less overhead. And sole proprietorship risks the owner's personal resources. Another video that will be found in the description. Alright, now we're talking about like finding a lawyer. So this is an option. An option for businesses that are a legal entity is to converse with large startup law firms. And these type of firms do not make business owners pay upfront, but they take a percentage of the company itself. If businesses do not want to work with large law firms, they can work with startup-friendly firms such as Atrium. Atrium is a corporate law firm that uses machine learning software to automate legal processes. And another option to find counsel is through colleagues or a friend recommendation. All right, we're going to be going over NDAs, IP, and other legal considerations. So an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, and it's an agreement that prevents unauthorized disclosure of secrets. If one is assigning development work to an outside organization, then that organization should sign an NDA. A venture capitalist provides startups with funds but receives a return investment, and they will most likely not sign an NDA. A founder's agreement is a necessary legal step when there are multiple founders involved. It can outline the responsibilities of each founder involved, and there doesn't have to be a template to use as a reference. It can be hard to publicate and often can contain numerous negotiations, and it can also be very time consuming to finish. What is an intellectual property or IP protection? So, this is a type of legal concept that provides legal protection for assets, and the trademark is a type of IP protection which shields the product of a company from being copied. It It patents guard an organization's product, and it gives a patent owner the right to prevent others from using, creating, or selling their patented product. Patents usually last several years, and for copyright, it guards original artistic works, and it's the primary IP protection for most startups. Fundraising. So fundraising is a full-time job and should be taken seriously. Venture capitalist firms invest in companies they believe in and hope they will receive a larger return. There are multiple investment types, such as pre-seed/seed, so it's investment that occurs early on before the company shows that the product will work. Series A and Series B, funding that has helped to help continue to scale the business. The pressure to deliver when a VC invests can be high, and it is likely that a business, even with the support, will be out of business in only a few years. Some VCs also work in pre-seed or seed funding, and pre-seed function typically occurs in the early stages of product development. Pre-seed investments range from $50,000 to $250,000, while seed investments range from $250,000 to $1 million. In 12 to 18 months, a seed VC may want you to fundraise 2 times the amount given, and when funding to VCs, it adds another person to answer to. Funding sources outside of VC, because obviously that's not the only option that you can use for funding. There are many different types of other ways. Some include angel investors, non-dilutive funding, crowdfunding, or accelerator programs. So, angel investors are usually wealthy people looking to passively fund startups with capital in exchange for equity and convertible debt. They don't expect slash want a 50x return on the investment, but instead have a different motivation. They usually invest about 25 to $250,000. For some angel investors, a 3 to 5 time return would be wonderful. For non-dilutive funding, it's money that is incorporated in order to support the product without having to give up any equity. And examples of this include bank loans or university or federal grants. Crowdfunding examples include Kickstarter and GoFundMe. They may assist in providing early adopters and may be more difficult than seed rounds. And accelerator programs are group-based programs where entrepreneurs produce their ideas into reality. They select a tiny percentage of companies help make those companies grow. They usually invest approximately $20,000 to $150,000 and ask for a 5 to 7% equity return investment. They offer mentoring, training, and feedback and usually last around 3 months. All right, crafting a fundraising narrative. A fundraising narrative shows why one is spending money in the first place. It's not the same thing as a pitch deck and is usually much less thorough. Although this is true, the primary questions have to still be answered. What are you creating? What is the most captivating factor of your business? How much progress has been made? And what are you striving to achieve? The narrative should be short and sweet and have the ability to informally discuss it with potential investors. It should be quick so that it can be explained in 20 seconds or less. The first 10 seconds are who you are, what you are doing, and why is it important. The last 10 seconds are progress, milestones, and long-term vision. And you should find the one persuasive reason as to why your company should receive investment. A good narrative should have a strong financial plan to support its claim, and financial models are essentially inferences in the scenario. Another video that'll be found in the description. All right, the last part of our presentation today. What makes a good pitch deck? Your pitch deck is basically your business card and it's given to those who are in the best position to help you, such as investors and mentors. One of the first things customers will see and will leave a huge impression about your company is a pitch deck. The key areas of this are problem and solutions, business models, and the market. So creating a deck. Start with whatever is the most persuasive, keep it incisive, and it's better to be concise than to make investors disinterested. Typically a length of 10 to 13 slides long, and the deck usually answers the whys behind an investment, such why is this a good opportunity? Why is this the proper team to do it? And why is this round of funding necessary? How to prospect your initial fundraising funnel. Generate contention amongst investors. 3-to-1 rule is important in order to generate competition between your investors. You want to be in the final stages of negotiation with 3 investors at the same time, and it's estimated to need about 10 meetings between investors in order to create a 3-to-1 situation. Some investor companies invest in numerous companies, while others only invest in a limited amount. And tools like Crunchbase and LinkedIn can help find investors if you cannot find 20 or more investors to start with. Other entrepreneurs have VC companies that work with them, making it easy to get advice and how to approach them. Focus on people in the VC business and not just firms. Initiating fundraising mode. So spend approximately 10% of time creating relationships with potential investors and founders later on in the process. These relationships can make it easy and quick to find high level investments and try to negotiate and finalize with an investor before moving on and searching for a new group. Also, understand the different types of people working at VC firms like partners, venture partners, principals, and associates. Partners generally are the people making the most decisions. Venture partners are the part-time workers and they look to source deals and make a couple investments. Principals are new to the business and just starting to make details, and associates cannot make investments at all, but can help business owners navigate through the investment process. Try to attempt to have a mutual acquaintance that introduces you to the investor. All right, understanding the stages of growth. So there are multiple stages of company growth, all with different goals. Sorry about that. Stage one, delivering a product. So can your team build something consumers will buy? Is the product ready to be sold on the market? And after their first sales, one has to ask themselves if they can turn their few customers to a whole customer base. The objective on this is to obtain a large amount of sales. Stage two, expansion. Survival is basically guaranteed at this point, and investors are guiding business to further success. The startup is now a more mature business and no longer considered a startup or a beginner. And you always have to do your homework before in order to have a chance of reaching stage two. How to build a product roadmap. So this is a guide through the whole business process from making a product to making your first sale. It creates milestones throughout the map in order to help shareholders know where key important events are in a basic timeline. A/B testing helps to set apart two options when coming across how a certain variable must function. A/B tests bring about valuable results about which option will perform the best based on a particular parameter or goal. It helps make decisions less biased, and it's an important decision when making a roadmap. If your product development team starts heading in the wrong direction, a pivot to your roadmap can help get things back on track. If something is not working, don't force it and don't cause more trouble by forcing it. We have an example of Instagram who pivoted their idea from being a check-in product to a place to post personal pictures to share with the world. They then stripped off any non-essential features in order to both save money and better fit the app. This is an example of product channel fit. So how effective is the product at having customers find it publicly? Common startup growing pains. So they can cause long hours and be extremely demanding. There are ways to conduct business with greater results for your employees and your own product as well. You want to create and enforce strict limits on work hours, and throwing all energy into a startup will actually hurt your product and its effectiveness. Generate nourishment codes for all employee, so the finish line for each employee, and pay a great amount of attention to the hiring process. Employing people that fit your company culture is the ultimate goal. Interviewing is also critical and is important to consider if a candidate will contribute and just be a non-negative. A good interview question would be to ask how the candidate worked through a real-life problem. And at a startup with less than 100 employees, the CEO themselves should be making the hiring decisions. Now we have culture. So culture is the persona of your company, and it's ultimately a mixture of the following: work environment, the company mission, values, ethics, expectations, goals. And think about having third-party voices giving a voice into the culture of your company, as this is going to be a possible benefit to you. Create a culture that can accommodate not just yours, but the company's strengths and weaknesses. Culture is not equal to perks, and it's more difficult to generate. Find different ways to talk to employees in mass, and information is received differently by different people, mentally speaking. Multiple pass-throughs will have to be used in order to spread necessary information, and a founder should personally interview at least 50 people for the first hires. Or 100, like the last slide said. It's better to do 100, but the slide says 50 here. Develop effective interview questions, and defining culture is obviously not the end. That's it for our presentation today. Thank you for watching.